Welcome to the Unlist. As you can tell by the title of today's video, we're going to be talking all about fragrances with the name L'Homme, which is capital L apostrophe capital H-O-M-M-E, like homme but with an L, L'Homme. I am definitely not a master of French, so even with that pronunciation, I am still probably messing it up, not putting the right inflections or emphasis on the right words, not saying certain consonants soft enough. You know, French tends to have very, very soft consonants in general. A lot of consonants don't even go pronounced in some words. They're just there to make the word longer when you write it. English, of course, does that too, a lot. But back on topic here, I decided to do a battle of the L'Hommes because I have quite a few fragrances with the name L'Homme, and they are all vastly different, and they are all from different eras. Now, I don't really know and don't really care to find out when the oldest instance of the word L'Homme comes into play. One of you guys want to go out there and start digging into perfume history and find for me the very first fragrance named L'Homme. And it can't be something pour L'Homme or L'Homme de something, just L'Homme. L apostrophe H-O-M-M-E. The very first designer or perfume house or whoever, drugstore maybe even, to come out with a perfume just called L'Homme. If you can find the first one, the oldest one, then maybe I'll check it out if it's something that's still made or easily attainable. But just for a fun little homework assignment, I will send you off to do that. In the meantime, the Battle of the L'Hommes will be between all the ones I own. Clearly, it can only be between the ones I own because I can't talk about things I've never smelled. And in this case, there aren't any L'Homme fragrances that I've smelled which I don't own. I haven't made it my life's goal to just smell a bunch of perfumes with the name L'Homme on them and then, you know, not buy them. I tend to smell things either via sample sent to me by friends and other interested parties, or I test on counters. So there's a 100% chance if I find a fragrance named L'Homme, it's through a sample, it's through testing at a counter, and everyone I've tried I've liked and bought. So there it is. Anyway, the Battle of the L'Hommes will begin. I will start with the oldest example I have and work my way up from there. First things first, we have ourselves this one. And I was turning my head sideways because someone was trying to message me while I was recording this video, and it appears this way on the phone screen. I'm using my phone this time, so I'm like, who is texting me and what are they trying to say? Anyway, it's not important. The first one is this guy right here. The camera's not going to focus because it's a crappy cell phone camera, but there it is. You can see it in reflection. L'Homme by Roger Gallet. This is the oldest instance of L'Homme that I have. Like I said, there are probably older ones, but this is my oldest. Now, this particular fragrance has a kind of interesting history for me because it has two different release years. It has 1979 and 1982. And when you have conflicting years like that, usually it means different releases in different markets. So I've done a little bit of homework on that and what I can find is all of the 1979 years correlate to French ads. So that leads me to believe, I can't prove this, but it leads me to believe that 1979 is when this came out in France. And the rest of the world didn't get this until 82. And that makes sense. Roger and Gallet has always been more of a French-focused French brand, by French for French. It's a household name that goes all the way back to past centuries. They're a very storied old perfume house. Roger and Gallet is right up there with Fragonard, Molinard, all of those guys. So maybe not on the same level of prestige as Houbigant or Guerlain, or Guerlain, however you want to say that. But they're definitely old and they're very well respected. And they don't tend to sell real well outside of France. That's the thing. This is not a house that does exceptionally well in the international market. Which is why whoever it was that bought them, I don't remember the conglomerate, but one of the big ones, I don't know if it was Coty or Revlon or P&G, but one of those big conglomerates bought Roger and Gallet and then proceeded to just sort of do nothing with them. Bought them and just let them carry on as they were, right? They just bought them to have them, put them up on a shelf, like my perfumes here. Just, okay, there you go, up on the shelf. L'Homme was really not all that popular in the United States because I've seen English ads for it. Like, and these are the 1982 year of release, which just lends me to believe that in the UK, the US, and other Anglophone countries, 82 was the right year. 79 was the year for France. And, well, it definitely has a structure that, and I spoke about this more in my other video that I did about Paco Rabanne Pour Homme and a lot of its smell-alikes. I talked about how the structure of this is very similar to Paco Rabanne Pour Homme, but Paco Rabanne Pour Homme itself was kind of an adaptation of something older, which I've also talked about. This little guy up here, the Sir Irish Moss, which kind of started this whole scent profile anyway, right? And then that led to a very popular soap, a soap that all of these perfumes get compared to. And then that popular soap led to a handful of other popular products, and eventually along comes Paco Rabanne. And then the success of Paco Rabanne led to a whole bunch of similar fragrances like Bogart, the original Bogart fragrance in 75. And then from there it just spirals. You get Worth Pour Homme, which had a regular and an oud concentration. You get this fragrance right here, which was up there as well. Just a lot of things that vibe in this particular vein. But the thing about the L'Homme that kind of makes it my favorite of this whole diaspora, if you will, the smoothness, the muskiness, a certain shave cream kind of vibe to it. Like, this really goes in a shave foamy direction. And considering they made shave products for this, I've got aftershave, I've got aftershave balm, skin soother, and I've got canned foam of this as well. All vintage products, but they're all still good. I've used them safely. But I've got shave foam, I've got a bunch of stuff. A lot of it came from Enchant Parfums in Canada. So, hello Anuj, if you're watching. But that's where the stuff came from. However, yeah, this really has that nice wet shaver feel. Dare I say this has more of a wet shaver feel than Paco Rabanne itself does. You smell Paco Rabanne and you go, okay, maybe shave soap, like a Proraso soap, which is similar, but not like canned foam or anything like that. This goes in that full kind of canned foam direction. So, and it's also very, very gently, because of the musk profile here, it very gently holds hands with Koros. Not the same level of animalis as in Koros. It's not like, this doesn't really smell animalic, but it just kind of, again, it sort of enters that direction. So, very well done, very smooth, very nice. I think, though, for Roger and Gallet, I think the most popular product they have, at least in the US, is this one. More guys in the US talk about Open than they do any other product from this house, old or new. That's the thing. They've had lots of newer fragrances, but this is just the one that anyone talks about. So I feel like this is where Roger and Gallet peaked in the US. Haven't really done better than that since. Now, the next L'Homme I have up on the menu is from 1984. A little bit newer. Not much, though. Only newer by a couple of years if you go by the American release date of the previous fragrance. But now I've got this in two varieties. I've got this nice vintage bottle here, and I'm sure for those of you with a keen eye, you will spot this as Versace L'Homme. But I've got this one, and then a more recent bottle. So for those of you absolute fucking dorks when it comes to vintage, like you absolute just incorrigible dorks that need to be super pedantic and super specific and have everything dotted and crossed and signed in triplicate. Those of you who make perfume very unfun, basically, you make it unfun, you will probably only recognize if I call this by its proper name of Thin Script Versace L'Homme. This is the Thin Script bottle because it has the first logo design of the house. So the thing that's kind of weird about Versace L'Homme in particular is every time the house updated its own logo, they would change the logo that was on the bottle. So when the logo changed from this to this, so it goes. But there was one in between this and this, a version of this with different letters. So a little more like narrow letters. So kind of this font, but a little more narrow. And that's like the second version, I guess you could call it, version 2. Like I said, I don't really know, I don't really care. I've got the very first one right here. This is the deep vintage. This is the quote-unquote king, the one that all you nerds go crazy about, the one that you will sit there and like harass people in forums about, oh, well, if you don't have that one, you don't have a real one. You don't really even know what it smells like, because if you don't have the old one, the oldest one, you don't really have it, do you? No, we're not doing that. But just to show, yeah, there's a big difference in the color. And there is, surprisingly enough, a big difference in the smell. Okay, now, I haven't worn much of this one, obviously, but the thing about the original L'Homme is it's kind of more ambery, and it's kind of more rounded. I feel like it has more tonka in it. The musk choices are very much a different kind of animal compared to the more recent bottles. And with that, it kind of goes without saying that I prefer the newer one. I'm keeping the old one. No, you can't have it. No, you can't buy it. But this one actually is a bit more focused on the chypre side of the composition because this is a citrus aromatic chypre. But the original one, for whatever reason, actually heads more in a amber direction or more of an oriental direction. So it's like a softer, rounder, more plush kind of smell, a little heavier. Whereas this one in its reformulated form actually is a bit more sour, more bergamot. The animalic musk used is a bit sharper. Uh, it just it seems to compete more with other Italian perfumes of that time. Yet it's a newer bottle, which is baffling. The older one stands further apart from its contemporaries. This one actually feels more in line with something like Gianfranco Fair or Armani Eau Pour Homme or one of those, right? So it's almost like they had a bit of a what's the word for it? Hindsight. They had a bit of a retroactive like, hey, let's make the scent profile more traditional, which is usually not a move you'd think they'd make with newer formulations of a fragrance to let's make it smell more old fashioned. But maybe they knew their audience. Maybe they knew the kind of guys who were still buying this and still wearing this. They were moving into that more mature territory. So they actually made the newer bottles smell more mature than the older ones, which is just a mind blower because you always think that the older ones are going to be more mature. You think they're going to have more gravitas. You think they're going to be more profound and epic and all that stuff. But it's actually not the case. The older bottle, because of the musk choices, because of the roundness, because of the amberiness of the scent profile, the older ones actually feel a bit more youthful. Not youthful by today's bubblegummy standards. Okay, don't get it twisted. I'm not talking about, this doesn't smell like Invictus, but just for the 80s, this smells more youthful for the 80s. The modern ones actually smell a bit more older, gentleman kind of thing. Overall, though, this is a very Italian fragrance, which also makes sense because Gianni Versace wore this as his signature for a very long time. Actually, he wore it right up until the year before he died. The intended the intended replacement for that was the Dreamer, but he didn't get to wear that very long before he was tragically, his life was tragically taken from him. Now, the next L'Homme on the menu, we are scooting forward. We are shooting all the way forward to the 2000s, actually. 2006. Yves Saint Laurent L'Homme. Now, this is a L'Homme of a different color because the previous two L'Hommes I mentioned are in general very, masculine, very stout, traditional men's fragrances. But that's what the late 70s, early 80s was all about. These very performative displays of masculinity, very stiff, strong. You can read all the double entendres into that you want. I don't mind. But by the 2000s, things were a bit different, and the general, I guess, Hergus Burgus, if you will, the general bric-a-brac was to try and have something that was a bit more, I guess, I don't want to say gender fluid because that's a serious term used by people to describe themselves, but just, a bit more loose with the hard line gender roles and the fragrances in the 2000s. We had this little thing we like to call metrosexual, right? And the metrosexual thing was like, straight guys who were basically co-opting fashions and mannerisms that were usually more likely to be found in gay men, but not just any gay men, flamboyant gay men. So straight guys adopting mannerisms and fashions from more flamboyant or effeminate gay men. And as someone who has been a part of the gay community for a very long time, I remember when that happened, and a lot of us were just kind of like rolling our eyes and going, okay, let them have it, right? Because the moment we speak up and say anything, it just, causes more problems than it's worth. Eventually, they got it out of their system, they got over it, and they moved on. But during that time, a lot of fashion houses, a lot of perfumers. There was even the Queer Eye for the Straight Guy TV show, which was the big thing that really cemented that movement. Honestly, that show cemented that movement. But the men's fragrance of the day, created by Yves Laurent, was kind of banking on that. And it was the last men's market fragrance that he would be alive to have any supervision of. Now, bear in mind that Saint Laurent was not involved with perfume really hardly at all after Jazz. Jazz was his last one that he really got his hands on. And Jazz did so poorly. Jazz failed so miserably that he was kind of kicked upstairs. You just run the house, you run the business. We'll take care of the perfume. Don't lose us any more money. So he had a thing to say here or there. I mean, he was involved with the other ones, but when the Tom Ford era happened, he was definitely not involved with any of those. He was actually disgusted at most of those, even though I like the Tom Ford stuff. But once Tom Ford left, for a couple of years, when the whole situation was up in the air, right before L'Oreal picked up the contract for the fragrances, right before L'Oreal got it, they popped out this one. And Dominique Ropion and Pierre Warganai were perfumers on this, and one other person whose name eludes me, but they kind of perfumed by committee, a three-way committee, and they created a very interesting sort of floral, fruity, spicy, sweet, the kind of thing I feel like would smell good on a man, a woman, or anybody, including a non-binary person. It just has a very neutral, pleasant smell. And the apple notes and the ginger notes and the general amber notes, the wood, the way it plays. This fragrance has always reminded me of like fall, a cozy early winter, late fall. You're sitting and you've got a hot cup of cider, like mulled apple cider. You're just enjoying the crisp air, and you got something cozy in your hand, and this is kind of that smell for me, which is amazing that this did so well that it actually spawned a bunch of flankers, and there's been a ton of flankers. There's been La Nuit L'Homme, there's been all the different L'Homme flankers over the years. There are like 20, I shit you not, 20 different goddamn bottles of this, and most of them are discontinued. Frozen Cologne, Eau de Jambre, Sport, the different parfums, the different intenses, the different parfum intenses, the different this, that, and the others. There's just so many different ones of this. Cologne Blue, you name it. Okay, guys. The only flanker I really liked from this line, besides the original, is the Ultime, which is also discontinued, of course, like most of them are. But I like the Ultime because the Ultime puts a twist of rose in it. It also adds a sharper sage note, which I believe is actually sclarine. But it kind of has the sclarine sage mixed with the that rose, so it gets like a nice aromatic, clean sort of rose interpretation of the original L'Homme profile. The rest of the perfume is basically still there. The apple is not really there though. Whereas the main kicker on the original is going to be the apple, lavender, ginger, the amber. Last but not least, we are going to discuss the last L'Homme I have. This guy right here. Yeah, here we go. This is the last L'Homme, the Battle of the L'Hommes. I've done 4. This is number 4. This one came out 10 years after the other guy. So 2006 for that YSL. This one is a Prada. 2016. So this one is kind of more of the direction that your typical conservative masculinity trope would take into the 2010s, right? We could start to see that. Whereas it was once shaving foam and stuff like that, or mossy perfumes or leathery perfumes, the whole businessman in the pinstripe suit and the tie begin to shift more towards soapy, clean profiles. So things that smell like bar soap, things that have a heavy iris note or a heavy, narrowly patchouli combination kind of a thing. Very sharp, clean, almost sterile, I guess. And that's the thing with this, guys, is the scent profile of this. It's playing off of the materials that Prada at the time was trying to make their house accord. Prada was trying to make their own version of Gallet. If you want to call it Prada Nod, you can. I don't know. It sounds kind of silly, but Daniela Andrade, I'm probably butchering that, but Daniela Andrade, she is a perfumer for Givaudan. And Andrade Rocha, actually, because hyphenated last name, she got married. But Daniela Andrade Rocha, she was like a unofficial house perfumer for Prada because she was there for the first one. She did the first men's fragrance, which was the Amber Pour Homme. And the whole point of Prada was to have iris, amber, and orange blossom more narrowly. The 3 primary things. Every Prada fragrance that she made had to either have those materials or reference those materials in some way, including the men's stuff. So all the men's stuff that was composed by her, with very few exceptions, had iris, had narrowly, had patchouli, had amber in some form, very clean amber. And this is no different. This takes the whole soapy clean thing that you found in the Prada Amber Pour Homme and pushes it more towards sharpness. The Prada Amber Pour Homme was a soft soapy scent with cardamom, with vanilla, very rounded, okay? This got rid of the rounding, toned down the vanilla, got rid of the cardamom, really pushed into the patchouli, really just laser focused on the sharpness, the cleanness. It was kind of Prada's answer to something like Dior Homme, which is baffling because Dior Homme didn't sell that well, outside of France anyway. So that's why it's been remade a dozen times. But for whatever reason, they wanted to have their own version. And I mean, it sells pretty well. They still make it, right? It survived a buyout from Puig to L'Oreal. For a while, it was people thought it was going to get discontinued, and they bought up all the bottles. And then they came back. But of all the L'Hommes I have, this one actually reads the most mature, in my opinion. Like, I think a silver-haired gentleman, a guy in his 60s, a guy in his 70s, the owner of the business, the guy who drives the Bentley or the old Cadillac or whatever, the stereotype, right? I feel like he's more likely to wear this than he is the one from 82 or the one from 84. You'd think, in your weird, fantastic, warped sense of vintage superiority, authority, some of you guys think that like these old cats live in this space where all they want to do is wear polo and eat red meat and shoot guns and read Bibles and like whatever. But that's just some weird. That's not how it is. I've actually smelled a lot of older gentlemen with their wife in hand a lot of times, okay, stepping out of a nice car. They don't smell like Polo. They don't smell like Halston Z14. They don't smell like Koros. Maybe they did when they were in their 20s. Maybe they did when they were in their 30s. But now that they're in the twilight, they're actually smelling like this. Or something similar to this, like a Dior Homme or something like that. The sharp, the clean, you know, the real well put together. That's what they're wearing. Every now and then you might luck out and they might be wearing Creed or something. But no, it's not ever Bois de Portugal either. It's usually like something like Green Irish Tweed. So even then. But yeah, it kind of lends me towards this one being the most mature smelling of the bunch. Surprise, surprise. Just from my personal experience because of my job and who I deal with every day. That's it. That's the Battle of the L'Hommes. I'll let you guys decide the winner if you want to. I'm not picking a winner. I'm just putting the battle in front of you, and then you can pick the winner or add a different one that I didn't mention. Whatever you want to do, it's up to you. It's supposed to be fun. So this has been the Unlist, and thanks.